Welcome back to the deep dive. So today we're going to tackle a word that gets thrown around a lot, often not in a good way: hedonism.
Mm-hmm.
Most of us, when we hear it, we probably picture something like uh, nonstop parties,
Yeah.
instant gratification.
Yeah, maybe that phrase, sex and drugs without concern for long-term consequences,
Yeah.
kind of sums up the common image.
Exactly. That popular idea, sometimes people call it folk hedonism. It's really just, well, scratching the
It
surface.
really is.
So our mission today is to push past that narrow view and really dive into hedonism as this, rich and pretty complex family of philosophical views that prioritize pleasure.
Okay, let's unpack this.
And it's fascinating because this isn't some new fad. This concept, it's been debated for literally millennia, ancient Greece right up to today.
Wow, millennia.
Yeah, and it has these really deep implications, not just in philosophy, but touching on psychology, economics, even how we think about things like animal welfare.
So our goal here is to help you get a quick, but hopefully pretty thorough grasp of what hedonism really means in all its different flavors, and maybe why these old ideas still matter so much.
Okay, so let's start with the basics: pleasure and pain. We all kind of get that intuitively, right? But how do philosophers and psychologists actually nail down these terms when they're talking about hedonism? Is it just like physical stuff?
That's a really key question because hedonists usually take a much wider view than just bodily feelings.
Okay.
While, yeah, traditional views maybe focus more there, contemporary philosophy broadens it out a lot. Pleasure can cover basically any positive experience.
Any.
Yeah, like the simple joy of watching a beautiful sunset, or the satisfaction you get from solving a really tough problem, or just feeling connected to friends.
Mhm.
And conversely, pain isn't just physical hurt. It covers any negative experience. It could be sadness, frustration, boredom, loss.
So it's more about attraction and aversion, like what we naturally move towards or pull away from.
Exactly. It's about these attitudes of attraction or aversion we have towards experiences. And these feelings exist on a whole spectrum, from really negative through neutral, all the way up to intensely positive.
Okay, that's a really broad definition: the joy of a sunset, the warmth of friendship. But my first thought is, if it's that wide-ranging, how on earth do you even start to measure something so subjective, so personal?
Yeah, that's definitely one of the thorniest issues.
Mhm.
And people have tried, both in philosophy and psychology.
Yeah.
Well, a common way in psychology is using self-report questionnaires,
Hmm.
asking people to rate their experiences on a scale, maybe like a 9-point scale.
Right, I've seen those.
Yeah, rating immediate feelings or looking back.
Huh.
But just like you said, there are big problems. It's super subjective. And comparing my 7 to your 7 on some artificial scale, it's tricky.
Yeah, definitely.
People also look at neuroimaging, like fMRI scans, trying to find brain correlates of pleasure and pain.
Yeah.
But, the science is still pretty early days in terms of precise measurement. What's fascinating here is how they try to make something so subjective, so measurable. Like Jeremy Bentham, back in the day, he had this incredibly ambitious idea.
Oh, yeah.
He came up with what he called the hedonistic calculus. He literally tried to create a formula for happiness.
A formula. Seriously.
Yeah. He suggested we could weigh pleasures based on things like their intensity, their duration, how likely they were to happen, even their knock-on effects, like how many other pleasures they might lead to. Imagine trying to assign numbers to joy.
Wow, a hedonistic calculus.
Yeah.
That is ambitious. Okay, so if pleasure is this broad, kind of slippery thing, how do different philosophical views actually handle it? It sounds like hedonism isn't just one single idea then.
Exactly right. It's really more like a family of related views.
Yeah.
And they usually get grouped into 3 main types, depending on what they're focusing on: human
Okay.
motivation, what we value, or how we ought to act morally.
Okay, 3 types. Let's break them down.
So first up, you've got psychological hedonism. This isn't about what should be. It's an empirical claim about how things are. It suggests that all human actions, like fundamentally, are driven by seeking pleasure and avoiding pain. It's often seen as a type of egoism, the idea that deep down, we're always acting for our own benefit.
So even helping someone else.
According to this view, yeah, you'd only do it if you expected some kind of personal payoff, maybe feeling good about yourself or avoiding guilt or hoping for a favor back. Thomas Hobbes was a big proponent of this idea.
But what about, there seem to be counterexamples, right? Like soldiers jumping on grenades to save their buddies, or parents who genuinely seem to want their kids to be happy, even if it makes their own lives harder.
Exactly. Those are the classic critiques.
Yeah.
Apparent altruism is a big challenge. Or even think about someone wanting to be famous after they die. How does that bring them pleasure right now? Psychological hedonism struggles to explain those convincingly.
Right. Okay, so that's one type. What's next?
Second is axiological hedonism.
Yeah.
Now, axiological just means relating to value. So this view is about what is actually good or valuable. And it claims that pleasure is the only thing that has intrinsic value.
Intrinsic value means...
Meaning it's good in itself just for its own sake, not because of what it leads to. Like money has instrumental value, right? It's useful for buying things.
Sure.
But axiological hedonism says only pleasure is good like that, intrinsically. Everything else, money, health, knowledge, is only valuable because it helps us get pleasure or avoid pain.
Gotcha.
And a specific version of this is prudential hedonism. That focuses just on individual well-being, saying pleasure and pain are the only things that make someone's life go better or worse for them.
Okay.
Within this, there's another split. You have quantitative hedonism, which basically just counts the amount of pleasure intensity times duration, like Bentham.
Right.
But then there's qualitative hedonism, most famously pushed by John Stuart Mill. He argued that the quality of pleasure matters too.
Quality. How so?
Well, Mill thought that some pleasures are just inherently better or higher than others, like the pleasures of the mind, reading poetry, doing philosophy, appreciating art. He thought those were qualitatively superior to purely bodily pleasures, like eating or drinking, even if the bodily ones felt more intense sometimes.
Interesting. So a little bit of intellectual pleasure could outweigh a lot of, say, basic physical gratification?
That was Mill's idea, yeah. Famously, he said it's better to be a human being dissatisfied than a pig satisfied.
Right. Okay. So on this idea of pleasure being the only value, I was reading about this thought experiment, Robert Nozick's experience machine.
Ah, yes. The experience machine. Classic.
It really made me stop and think. It asks, if you could plug into this machine that would give you any experience you wanted, perfect pleasure, constant bliss for your whole life, but you'd know it wasn't real, it was all simulated, would you do it? And the question is, what does our answer tell us about what we really value?
It's such a powerful challenge, isn't it? Because it directly hits axiological hedonism. Most people, when they really think about it, hesitate. They wouldn't plug in.
Yeah, I think I probably wouldn't either.
And that hesitation suggests we value things other than just the feeling of pleasure itself. We seem to value, well, authenticity, real experiences, genuine achievement, actually doing things and connecting with a real world, not just having the sensation of doing them.
So pleasure isn't the only thing with intrinsic value for us.
That's what Nozick's argument suggests.
Yeah.
And there are others too. G.E. Moore had another famous thought experiment. He asked us to imagine two worlds.
Okay.
One is incredibly beautiful, just stunningly gorgeous, but completely empty, no one there to see it. The other world is just a disgusting heap of filth, also empty. Moore argued the beautiful world is still better, even with no one experiencing it.
Huh. So beauty itself might have value.
Exactly. His point was that value might exist in things beyond conscious experiences like pleasure. It challenges the idea that pleasure is the sole source of all value.
Okay, that makes sense. So we've had psychological, axiological. What's the third type?
The third main branch is ethical hedonism. This moves from what is psychological or what is valuable, axiological, to what we should do morality.
Right, the ought.
Yes. Ethical hedonism says that the pursuit of pleasure and the avoidance of pain should be our highest moral goals. Things like duty, rights, justice. They're only important insofar as they affect pleasure and pain overall.
Okay. And does that split too?
It does. The two main forms are quite different. First, there's egoistic hedonism. This says each person should morally pursue their own pleasure above all else.
That sounds problematic. Like it could justify hurting others if it benefits me.
Potentially, yes. If maximizing my net pleasure involves causing pain to others, this view might say I'm morally obligated to do it. It's not a very popular view for obvious reasons.
I can see why. What's the other form?
The other, much more influential form is utilitarian hedonism. This is basically classical utilitarianism.
Bentham Mill again.
Exactly. This view says we should act to maximize the total sum of happiness, pleasure minus pain, for everyone affected by our actions. It's the famous principle of the greatest good for the greatest number.
So it's not just about my pleasure, but everyone's.
Precisely. It's impartial. My happiness counts, but no more than anyone else's. A contemporary example is someone like Peter Singer.
Okay.
He uses this kind of reasoning to argue that people in affluent countries have a strong moral obligation to donate significant portions of their income to effective charities.
Because that money creates more happiness elsewhere.
Exactly. The same amount of money can often produce far more well-being or alleviate far more suffering for someone in extreme poverty than it can by buying, say, luxury goods for someone already well off.
Right, that makes sense. But are there criticisms of utilitarian hedonism, too?
Oh, absolutely. One major criticism is that it can be incredibly demanding. If I always have to act to maximize overall happiness, maybe I should never spend money on myself or even relax if I could be doing something more useful for the greater good.
Yeah, that sounds exhausting.
Another big worry is about justice and rights. Could utilitarianism justify sacrificing an innocent person if it somehow led to greater overall happiness for many others? Some critics argue it could, which seems morally wrong to many people. Plus, just practically figuring out all the consequences of our actions for everyone's happiness is, well, basically impossible.
Okay, so lots of different takes on hedonism there, but let's shift gears a bit. Even if we kind of agree pleasure is good, or maybe even the main goal, actually achieving lasting happiness seems tricky, right? It
Yeah.
feels like it's not as simple as just deciding, I'm going to be happy now.
Oh, definitely not. Psychology throws up some really interesting roadblocks or maybe paradoxes.
Like what?
Well, first, there's something called the paradox of hedonism.
Paradox.
Yeah, the core idea is that directly aiming for pleasure, constantly trying to make yourself happy, is often counterproductive, kind of backfires. Think about it. If you're always monitoring yourself, asking, am I happy yet? Is this fun enough? So you often end up spoiling the experience. Happiness or pleasure often seems to arise as a byproduct when you're absorbed in something else. Could be meaningful work, a hobby, helping someone, connecting with nature.
Right, like focusing too hard on trying to have fun at a party can make it less fun.
Exactly. Or think of a tennis player. If they're solely focused on the feeling of enjoyment with every shot, they might get frustrated. But if they focus on playing well, on the challenge, on the flow of the game, the enjoyment often just happens. Pleasure sneaks in the side door when you're not looking directly at it.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. What's the other barrier?
The second big one is known as the hedonic treadmill.
Treadmill, like running in place.
Kinda, yeah. This is the theory backed by quite a bit of psychological research, that people tend to return to a relatively stable baseline level of happiness, even after major life events, positive or negative.
So, like winning the lottery doesn't make you permanently happier.
Well, it gives you a boost, for sure. But the research suggests that after maybe a year or so, lottery winners often aren't significantly happier, on average, than they were before they won. Their happiness level seems to adapt and return to their personal set point.
Huh. And does it work for bad things, too?
To some extent, yes. People are often surprisingly resilient. After experiencing negative events like disability or loss, their happiness levels often dip significantly, but then tend to gradually recover towards their baseline over time, though maybe not always fully back to where they were.
Wow. Okay, so this treadmill idea, this raises an important question. If our happiness levels tend to just reset themselves after a while, what does that mean for trying to achieve long-term happiness goals? Does it kind of undermine the whole effort?
That's the big implication, yeah. If we just adapt to better circumstances, simply chasing external achievements or possessions might not be a reliable path to lasting increases in well-being. It suggests we might need to focus on other things, maybe internal states, attitudes, or the nature of our pursuits themselves, rather than just the outcomes.
Really makes you think. Okay, so these are complex ideas with deep roots. Maybe we could briefly touch on that history. Where did all this thinking about pleasure actually start?
Oh, it goes way back. Hedonism is genuinely one of the oldest philosophical theories around. In ancient Greece, you had thinkers like Aristippus and the Cyrenaics. They were very much about immediate sensory pleasure, like right now, what feels good.
The original folk hedonists, maybe?
Sort of. But then you had Epicurus, who often gets lumped in with them, but was actually quite different. He also valued pleasure, but defined it more subtly as the absence of pain and mental disturbance. He advocated moderation, simple living, and philosophical contemplation to achieve ataraxia, a state of calm tranquility.
So less wild parties, more quiet contemplation.
Exactly. And then, of course, you had major figures like Plato and Aristotle who were critical. They didn't dismiss pleasure entirely, but they argued it wasn't the highest good. For them, pleasure had to be linked with virtue, reason, and living a flourishing human life, eudaimonia.
Okay, ancient Greece, what happened after that? Did it just disappear?
Not entirely. Though it was less prominent in the medieval period, often viewed with suspicion by dominant religious views. But you saw echoes. Maybe Augustine wrestling with earthly pleasures versus divine ones, or Aquinas talking about the ultimate pleasure being the vision of God, and interesting strands in Islamic philosophy, too.
Right. And then more recently.
It really picked up again around the Renaissance and Enlightenment. You had figures like Lorenzo Viola trying to square Christian ethics with Epicurean ideas. Then thinkers like Hobbes, Locke, and Hume put pleasure and pain right back at the center of human motivation and morality.
And that leads into Bentham and Mill.
Precisely. The 18th and 19th centuries saw the huge rise of classical utilitarianism with Bentham's calculus and Mill's qualitative distinctions. That really set the stage for a lot of modern ethical and political thought.
But it wasn't all smooth sailing.
No, the 20th century brought major critiques. We talked about G.E. Moore arguing for other intrinsic values besides pleasure, and Nozick's experience machine. Others pointed out problems like malicious pleasures. Is the pleasure a sadist gets from hurting someone actually a good thing to put in the utilitarian calculation?
Yeah, tricky questions.
And even today, philosophers like Fred Feldman are working on modified versions, like attitudinal hedonism, trying to refine the concept to address these long-standing challenges.
So it's clear this isn't just some dusty old philosophical debate. It seems like these ideas about hedonism in the broader sense are still really relevant today, right? Across lots of different areas.
Oh, absolutely. You see its influence everywhere once you start looking. Take positive psychology, for example. A huge chunk of that field is essentially hedonic psychology.
Really? How so?
Well, they're scientifically studying pleasant and unpleasant experiences.
Yeah.
Happiness, joy, contentment, but also sadness, anxiety. They look at their biological bases, their social functions, how to cultivate positive emotions. They even study things like anhedonia, which is a clinical inability to feel pleasure, or sometimes hedonophobia, an actual fear of pleasure.
Wow, fear of pleasure. Okay. What about other fields?
Economics is another big one. Think about welfare economics. A lot of that rests on the idea that the goal of economic policy should be to promote societal happiness, often measured in terms of preference satisfaction, which links back to pleasure.
Right.
There's the whole economics of happiness movement, studying how wealth actually correlates or doesn't with subjective well-being, and even technical things like hedonic regression in pricing, trying to value a product based on the pleasure or utility its different features provide. And then there's animal ethics. We mentioned Peter Singer earlier. His influential arguments for animal welfare are deeply rooted in utilitarian hedonism. The core idea is that sentient animals can experience pleasure and pain, perhaps differently from us, but their suffering matters morally, and we should act to minimize it.
So it stretches from our own psychology to economics to how we treat other species.
Exactly. And you see echoes in popular culture, too. Of course, consumerism, entertainment, ideas about the good life. Even some religious traditions have concepts like Christian hedonism, arguing that finding ultimate pleasure in God is the highest aim.
So we've really covered a lot of ground here. We started with that common kind of narrow idea of folk hedonism, just indulgence, right? And we've journeyed through to seeing hedonism as this really broad, quite nuanced family of philosophical ideas about the central role of pleasure and pain in how we're motivated, what we value, and how we think about morality.
Yeah.
It's really clear that hedonism, understood properly, is, well, a powerful lens for looking at human experience. It goes way beyond just simple indulgence.
Absolutely. I think this deep dive really shows just how diverse these ideas are, how influential they've been across history, and, importantly, how they're still shaping our conversations today about what it even means to live a good life.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now?
Well, maybe think about those psychological challenges we discussed. Consider the paradox of hedonism in your own life. Do you find that chasing happiness directly actually works for you? Or does it tend to show up more as a side effect when you're engaged in other things you care about? And what about the hedonic treadmill? How does that idea resonate with your own experiences of ups and downs? And maybe more broadly, how do you personally try to balance seeking immediate pleasure or gratification with maybe longer-term goals, deeper well-being, and also, importantly, thinking about the well-being of others around you? Lots to chew on there.